Can cheap be good? Today we have our PPU defense line in 45 ACP and 357 Magnum. So this ammo, I got these locally, and these 50 round boxes cost about the same as a typical 20 round box of like Federal HST, Spear Gold, that stuff like that. So these rounds of ammunition are less than half the price of typical, because they are kind of a budget friendly option here. So our 45 auto is a 185 grain that is rated at 935 feet per second, no barrel length listed. And our 357 Magnum is a 158 grain jacket hull point rated at 1607 feet per second. I'm definitely skeptical on that, because most 158 grain 357 Magnums do about 1250 feet per second. That's their rating. So PPU defense line, I'm going to do different barrel lengths today. So for 45 auto, I'm going to use my 5.3 inch Glock 41 and my 3.3 inch Shield 45 to test the 45, and to test the 357 Magnum, I'm going to use my 4 1/8 inch Smith & Wesson 686 and my 2-inch barrel Taurus 605 to do this test. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time, see if those ratings line up with what we actually get. Then I'm going to do my real world simulation shots with every one of these shots. So I'm going to go through 4 layers of sweatshirt material, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, then another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh, so whatever you see in here is going to be about half that far in an actual living target. So if we get, like, let's say 18 inches, that would represent like 9 inches in a real living target. So if we go about 3 inches past this back rib simulation and beyond that, that could indicate that it could pass through an average size individual. So we'll do our real world simulation test with all these shots, and then I will shoot a steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, let's run these over the chronograph. We'll start with our 45 auto through our 5.3 inch barrel. This is rated at 935 feet per second. That's probably through a 5-inch barrel. So let's see how close we get to 935 feet per second with my Glock 41 here. .896, 908, 901, 933, 833. So, 185 grain. That's not great velocity. So let's try our 357 Magnum through our 4-inch barrel here. This is rated at 1607 feet per second. If that's true, this is going to have some of the most horrendous recoil I've ever felt. So I'm going to have to fire single action just so, I don't jerk these shots. Let's see how close I get to 1607 feet per second. .1344. Well, that is actually pretty hot, to be honest. 1359. 1260. 1274. 1277. So even though it wasn't super consistent, I'm not going to complain on that, because that 1277 is faster than typical ammo out of this gun. So that's actually pretty powerful ammo for what it is. So let's try our subcompact barrels now. Here is our 45 auto, or our Shield, with the 3.3 inch barrel. Let's see how this does. .814, 840, 864, 868, 857. So not great, but honestly not too bad, considering we dropped 2 inches of barrel off from that. That's not terrible. Now we'll try our snub here. This is going to have a lot of recoil, so I'm going to fire it single action. Typical, I think we get about 1,050 for typical ammo out of this with a 158 grain, something like that, or maybe 1,100. Let's see what we get here from our snub. 1,068, 1,083, 1,172. 1168, 1170. You know, that doesn't make any sense why it's low right away, but then we just get these really high velocities. I don't know. But what I can say is, at least with the 357 Magnum, we are definitely a full power load here. It's not super consistent, but you know, the lower end numbers are actually higher than typical. So you kind of can't complain in some respect. That's not bad. So let's start our ballistics gel block and see how these all compare. All right, so we're going to do what I call our real world simulation. 4 layers of sweatshirt material, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. You got to remember that's about a half representation of the density there. So 3 inch pectoral muscle simulation is more like 1.5 inches of actual skin and flesh. And so on. So hopefully I can keep these within the back rib simulation without passing through. So let's see what we get with our 45 ACP through our 5.3 inch barrel. All right. Now let's hit that with our 357 Magnum through our 4 inch barrel. Let's go take a look. All right, so that's pretty typical penetration, at least for the 357 Magnum being of that grain weight. The 45 Auto, not so much. It is snowing out here. You know, I'm going to say this. If you guys are using the Weather Channel app, stop using it. It is not snowing right now, according to it right now. It was not supposed to snow, according to it. And I come out here, you know, specifically when it's not snowing so that I don't get these weird views of snowflakes all over. But we'll take a look here. Our first 3 inch piece, and what we got going on here, the energy dump with the 357 on the top is a lot more devastating than that 45 down there on the bottom. And if we look at our rib simulation here, same story, the 357 on top, the 45 on the bottom. So before it hit that rib simulation, that 45 doesn't appear to be expanding at all. And what we got going on here with penetration is with our 45 Auto, we went right to that rib simulation and it bowed it out a little bit. So I'm going to say 19.5 inches. With our 357 Magnum, we got about 20.5 inches, and it went through that back rib simulation. I'm not going to call that like dangerous over penetration. I don't think it would pass through an average size individual, but it went a little bit deep. So let's try our short barrels now. All right, moving on to our short barrels. Let's see how we do with our 45 ACP. All right, now let's hit that with our 357 Magnum. Let's go take a look. All right, so pretty consistent performance with the 357 compared to what it did to the longer barrel. The 45 though, that changed. Again, no energy dump in this first 3 inch piece like it didn't have with the longer barrel, but at least with the 5 inch barrel, once we got through it, the track that I see indicates it was started to expand right there. With the shorter barrel, it indicates it went to about 5.5 inches and then started tumbling from non-expansion and then kind of straightened back out, and then it hit the rib simulation. So we're not expanded with that, at least not very much. So with the 45, we went right to that rib simulation, and right beyond it, we're right about 19.5, just like it was to the longer barrel. It just kind of equaled out. Like, you know, with the longer barrel, it had more power, so it could push an expanded hollow point further. With the shorter barrel, it had less power, but then it didn't expand, and it, you know, and it used that remaining power to just go to about the same depth. but totally different performance. With the 357, we got a lot less energy dump going in there, and probably a little bit less expansion, and we went right to about 20.5. So the same penetration with both of these from both barrel lengths. So at least it's consistent in that regard, but just not the best performance I've seen with the 45. It's okay with the 357. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at them. Then I'm going to shoot our steel and see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through our longer barrels here. And this was a first. I didn't have to actually cut open any of these blocks. They were right there right at the end of the first one or entering the second one. So I was able to just pull them all out. Here is our 45 through our 5.3-inch barrel. And honestly, for what it is, that's not too bad. I mean, I've seen a lot better performance, and you can get a lot better performance, but the recoil is super low. It's like shooting a 9mm. So if you can get, 45 performance with 9mm recoil, not a bad thing. Now here is our 357 Magnum going through our 4-inch barrel. We did get a little bit of fragmentation of that lead, and we busted off some pieces. So the size of it is actually a little bit smaller than the one going through the 2-inch barrel. So our 2-inch barrel 357 Magnum, it looks pretty good in comparison to the 4-inch barrel. So, for its ballistics, didn't perform all that bad. Now our 45 with the short barrel got no expansion. I mean, this is typical for a 230 grain out of that short barrel, but not a 185. There should have been enough velocity there. That was moving. I've seen some like 230 grain rounds do about the velocity that this did out of that short barreled pistol, and those will actually perform better because better bolt designs, a little more energy. So not the best 45 there. I mean, it's acceptable because it didn't really over penetrate significantly. It still gets some good damage, but our 357 here is a lot better of a round. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target, just my practical shootability drill. So from this distance, I'm going to focus on the short barrels, and I put my smaller magazine on the MAP 45 here just to be a little bit more comparable to that snub-nosed 357 Magnum. So I'm just going to pop off some shots as fast as I think I can hit the target and just kind of see how these things compare for recoil. So let's see what we get with our short barrels here from 14 yards. 45 auto. All right, just getting a quick front sight picture. Those shoot okay. 357 Magnum. Let's see how this does. That's definitely night and day, but I can tell you, I think that the target would appreciate the 45s a little better because these hit really hard. So let me back it up with my longer barrels and see how they shoot from a little more distance. All right, 40 yards from the target. So this is kind of the outer limits of typical defensive handgun use. So let's kind of see what I get here with our 45 and then our 357 Magnum through the 4-inch barrel. And we'll see how these things will shoot for me. I'm just going to fire pretty slow, see if I can hit the target. So 45 ACP 185 grain. Let's see how this does. Well, that's pretty good. I'll be back. Well, the bolt is gone. I'll keep going. All right, so that stuff shoots pretty good for what it is. Now we'll try our 357 Magnum. This stuff is pretty powerful. See how this does. right, so that stuff's pretty shootable here. So looking at this, I'm gonna say this is a pretty good value on 357 Magnum. You know, it's not super consistent, but if you're looking for a full power 158 grain, I'm gonna say at least out of a gun like this, pretty good. I wouldn't choose it for the snub. I wouldn't choose really any full power 158 grain for a snub anyways, but looking at it for its intended purposes, probably a 4-inch to a 6-inch barrel 357 Magnum, it looked like a decently performing round that is, you know, it shoots pretty comfortably out of a gun like this. It's a full power round. It did everything that we kind of want a 158 grain to do. You know, 158 grain is kind of the jack of all trades weight. It will dump a lot of energy, but then it will also penetrate deep. So it can do a lot of things, personal defense, bear defense, stuff like that. So looking at this, I'm going to say that the 357 is a pretty good option here. Now the 45, I'm going to limit that and say, you know, to a 5-inch barrel or greater, it's okay. You know, that's kind of getting in that range of you're getting what you pay for. Not great performance. There's so many better options out there, but with this, you're kind of getting more than what you pay for that 357 Magnum. It's not bad 357 ammo. Sure, it didn't hit that 1607 feet per second, but you know, we're right there, probably 50 feet per second or more above typical 158 grain rounds out of a gun with a 4-inch barrel. So pretty good ammo. So interesting results. That's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.